They say when the lights are brightest, the shadows grow longer. She stood at the edge of the stage, her smile a familiar shape, like armor she'd worn so long it became indistinguishable from her skin. The crowd roared, applause thundered. She waved, nodded, cracked a joke so well-timed it felt rehearsed. Because it was. Because for years, this had been her rhythm. Perform, please, repeat. Beneath the laughter and practiced charm, beneath the makeup and tailored suits, something quietly unraveled inside her. This wasn't burnout. This was soul-deep fatigue. A slow erosion of self under the pressure of being everything to everyone, all the time. Her name echoed in millions of homes. She was the smile they needed at the end of a hard day, the laughter they clung to when their own joy felt out of reach. But when the lights cut out and the crowd disappeared, silence fell like a stone. The quiet didn't comfort her, it confronted her. Every night, she went home to rooms too large and too empty, poured a glass of wine she didn't want, turned on music she didn't hear. Some nights she'd stare at the ceiling, wondering when the applause had stopped being enough, or if it ever had been. Fame had given her everything, and taken just as much. But tonight, something felt different. She felt it the moment she read the guest list. A name stood out, not because of its fame, but because of its weight. Senator John Walker, not a celebrity, not a performer, a man known for principle, for stillness, for walking through political fire without ever sounding bitter. She didn't know why his name unsettled her. The producer leaned in backstage, whispering logistics, camera angles, segment timing. She nodded, but her fingers twitched. There was something unnameable inside her chest. Not anxiety, not fear, something older, like recognition. When she walked on stage, the lights were warm as always, the audience clapping like clockwork. She smiled on cue, sat down, crossed her legs just so. This was her dance, her domain. She welcomed him with a trademark warmth. He returned it, not with flash, but with presence. There was a steadiness to him, like an old oak that had survived storms without breaking. His eyes held no judgment, only depth. They talked politics, briefly. He spoke of serving with integrity, of how compromise wasn't the same as surrender, and how listening had become a lost art. She nodded along, but her hands were cold. Then came the moment. "I brought something for you," he said gently, reaching into his coat. She blinked. That wasn't in the prep notes. He pulled out a book, not new, not showy, a Bible, worn, softened by decades of use. The leather had creases like old hands that had known both hard work and prayer. He set it down between them. "This helped me when I forgot who I was," he said. "I thought maybe it could help you too." She froze. The audience chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or lean in. "You brought me a Bible?" she asked, voice light but shaky. "There's something inside it I didn't write," he replied. Her eyes dropped to the book. Her name was written on an envelope inside, in handwriting she hadn't seen in over a decade. Her mother's. Time collapsed. The lights dimmed, not physically but emotionally. The stage was no longer a studio. It became a confessional. She reached out, touching the leather. Her fingers brushed the envelope, her throat closed. She could barely speak. "She gave it to me years ago," he said quietly. "Told me to give it to you when the time felt right." She looked at him, tears already forming. "Why now?" He just shrugged, smiling gently. "Because something told me it was." The letter was short, honest, devastating. "If you're reading this, it means the world gave you everything you asked for, but maybe not everything you needed. I saw how bright your dreams burned, but I also saw the part of you no one else did. The part that felt like it had to earn love. Fame is loud, but your soul whispers, don't forget how to listen. Love, Mom." She cried, not the kind of cry you tidy up with a tissue, but the kind that leaves you breathless, exposed. The room was dead silent, and then the truth fell out of her like rain. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said. "I smile, I dance, I make people laugh, but when I'm alone, I feel like I disappear." Senator Walker didn't speak. He didn't comfort. He witnessed. Sometimes that's all we need. To be seen without being fixed. She spoke for the first time, not as a host, but as a human. She talked about the pills she used to sleep, the wine she drank just to feel still, the loneliness that crept in between interviews and applause. She didn't mean to say it, but once it started, it didn't stop, and no one turned away. Not the cameras, not the crew, not the millions watching, because they weren't watching a breakdown, they were watching a breakthrough. He told her one thing before the segment ended. The world will try to tell you who you are. Faith helps you remember who you've always been. She nodded, and then whispered, I want to find her again. That night, she went home and opened the Bible. Not because she suddenly believed everything, but because something inside her hoped. She read her mother's letter again, and again and again. She stayed up all night, not to numb herself, but to feel, to remember. At dawn, she opened a journal. It was dusty, half filled with old entries. She found one from her 20s. It read, I don't want to lose my joy chasing someone else's approval. She smiled through tears. Maybe she hadn't lost herself. Maybe she had just stopped listening. That morning, she took a walk without her phone. She made a call to someone she hadn't spoken to in 10 years. She poured the wine down the drain, flushed the pills. She didn't post about it, didn't make a spectacle. She just began again, not as a host, not as a brand, but as a woman ready to meet herself again, without applause, without permission. And this, dear listener, this was only day one. If you've ever carried a weight you couldn't name, or worn a mask that felt safer than the truth, you are not alone. There's a page in all of us waiting to be turned. Some mornings don't begin with the sun. They begin with silence. She sat on her back porch, legs curled beneath her, watching as the horizon shifted slowly from grey to gold. The world was waking up, but she had been awake for hours. Sleep had come in fragments, moments of rest, between waves of emotion she wasn't sure how to name. Relief, sadness, hope, grief. They all tangled together like vines in her chest. In her lap lay the letter again, creased now from being folded and unfolded too many times. Her mother's words echoed louder now that the studio lights were gone, now that it was just her and the stillness she had spent years avoiding. If the world gave you everything you asked for, but not everything you needed. How many nights had she begged for this kind of success? How many days had she told herself that once she made it, once the world finally loved her, everything would fall into place? But the love she earned came with strings that pulled her further from herself. She breathed deeply, then stood. Inside, the house felt different. Not physically, spiritually, as if something invisible had shifted. As if the truth she had spoken the night before had left fingerprints on the walls. She walked to the kitchen, made tea, no phone, no TV. For once, no distractions. She reached for a notebook. Not the kind her assistant gave her for schedules and meetings. An old one, leather-bound, tucked in the back of a drawer. It still smelled like dust and time. Inside were pages she had filled in her 20s, before the fame, before the show, before she became a brand. She flipped through old poems, prayers, questions. And then, there it was, a list titled, Things I Swore I'd Never Forget. 1. Laughter is sacred. 2. Kindness counts more than ratings. 3. Fame is not the goal, truth is. 4. I don't need to be liked to be loved. 5. Don't fake it. Feel it. She stared at the last line for a long time. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped following that rule. She remembered a moment years ago after the show had exploded into success. She had been offered a massive contract. Everyone celebrated. Everyone except her. She remembered crying in the dressing room and not knowing why. She chalked it up to stress. But maybe. Her soul had been trying to speak, and she'd silenced it with money and motion. A knock at the door broke the quiet. It was her neighbor. Older. Soft-spoken. She held a plate of banana bread and eyes that saw too much. I watched the show last night, the woman said gently. You looked more human than I've ever seen you. Thank you for that. They sat together in the living room, banana bread between them, the kind of conversation that flows when no one is trying to impress the other. The neighbor shared her own battles, her own masks, her own faith. I used to think faith was about answers, she said, but I think it's more about holding questions with open hands, trusting that healing doesn't always come in lightning bolts. Sometimes it's in crumbs, soft things, quiet mornings. That night, she opened the Bible again, not out of duty, out of longing. She read Psalm 42. Why are you cast down, O my soul? Hope in God. Something broke open. She knelt beside her bed, not to perform, not to impress, just to be seen. Her whispered prayer wasn't elegant. It was jagged, but it was real. God, if you're still there, help me find the pieces. The next day, she called her brother. They hadn't spoken in years, not since a family disagreement that fame had widened into silence. I miss you, she said. He paused, then cried. So did she. They talked for hours, about childhood, about who they were before the world expected them to be anything else. Every night that week, she opened a new page in the Bible, not for performance, for guidance. She began to write again, real letters in her journal, to no one and to everyone. Letters to her younger self, letters to her future self, letters to God. Each day she peeled back a little more of the armor. Each day she felt more fragile and somehow more whole. She returned to the studio a week later, same lights, same audience, but she was not the same. She stepped on stage not to entertain, but to speak. To the millions of you watching, thank you for letting me be real last week. I'm not okay, but I'm learning that's not a weakness, it's a beginning. The audience stood. I've built a life on smiles, and I'm grateful for that. But I don't want to smile through pain anymore. I want to heal, out loud. People cried, cheered, held each other. And far beyond the walls of that studio, others listened. A girl in Idaho who felt invisible. A father in New York battling addiction. A pastor in Texas who thought faith had become hollow. They wrote in. Thousands of letters. One said, "Your honesty helped me believe again." Another said, "I flushed my pills. I want to feel again." She read every one. She knew she couldn't fix the world. But maybe she could help people feel seen, like Senator Walker had done for her. And she realized something powerful. Faith is not a performance, it's a posture. You don't have to be perfect to believe. You don't have to be whole to start healing. You just have to be willing to listen to the whispers, even when they hurt, especially when they hurt, because sometimes the soul doesn't scream, it murmurs. And the bravest thing you can do is be quiet long enough to hear it. So she did, and the echoes within her finally became clear. Some stories don't end, they evolve. It had been 3 months since the letter, 3 months since a Bible cracked open her past, since a mother's voice reached through paper and time, since her soul woke up after years of scripted laughter and performance. She stood now in front of a small crowd, not in a stadium, not on a TV set, but in a community center in her hometown, the one she'd left behind chasing dreams she no longer fully recognized. "I used to think healing would come in a moment," she said, her voice steady, eyes soft. "Turns out it comes in choices. Small, ordinary, sometimes terrifying choices." The room was full of strangers and not strangers, her high school art teacher, her childhood best friend, a woman who once worked the register at the grocery store, and Senator John Walker, sitting quietly in the back, just like he had when he first handed her the Bible that rewrote her life. After the show aired, the one where she broke, or rather began to break open, she had stepped back, not quit, just paused, to feel, to breathe, to live. She moved out of her sprawling home in the hills, bought a modest place in the valley with a garden she planted herself, tomatoes, peppers, wildflowers that made no sense and didn't match but thrived anyway. She liked that. She joined a local church, not because she had all the answers, but because something inside her was hungry for presence, not performance. She read scripture every morning now. Sometimes it moved her, sometimes it confused her, sometimes it just sat on the page, quiet. But she showed up anyway. Some days were beautiful, others brutal. There were mornings she woke up sure of everything, and nights when doubt crawled back in, whispering, "This won't last, you're still pretending." But she didn't run from the whispers anymore. She listened, and then answered with truth. "Maybe I'm still learning, but I'm not pretending." One of the most unexpected changes was her relationship with her audience. They wrote to her differently now. Not like fans, but like fellow travelers. "I left my abusive marriage after watching your episode. I prayed for the first time in years. I called my estranged daughter. We're healing." She printed those letters. Read them aloud at night, prayed over them, wept with them, celebrated them. They reminded her that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's contagious courage. One evening she got a letter without a return address. Inside was a single sentence. "You helped me believe God hadn't given up on me." She held that note for a long time. She didn't know who wrote it, but she knew exactly what it meant. That same night she picked up a pen and began writing the letter she had been too afraid to write. Not to her fans, not to her producers, not even to her younger self. To her mother. "Dear Mom, I don't know if you can read this. I don't know how heaven works. But I need to believe you can hear me. You were right. About everything. I forgot how to listen to my heart, to God, to the part of me that still believed in softness. I wrapped myself in a smile and called it strength, but I was breaking. That letter you left me, it didn't just save me. It found me. And Mom, I'm not who I was. I'm still funny, still loud, still stubborn. But now I'm also quiet sometimes. Still, open. I joined a church. I'm rebuilding relationships. I even apologized to people I never thought I'd face again. I'm becoming me, the real one, not the version everyone needed, the one you always saw. I love you. Your Ellen, she folded it, slipped it into the back of her Bible. Right behind her mother's original note, they belonged together. Weeks later, she stood again on her show stage. The same lights, same applause. But everything had changed. Not the world, not the industry, not the fame. Her. She faced the camera, took a breath, and spoke directly to the millions watching. Thank you for walking with me. Not just through the good times, but the real ones. The ones that scared me. The ones I almost didn't survive. If you've ever felt lost, broken, addicted, ashamed, I want you to know there is always a way home. She paused, eyes filled with peace. I used to think I had to shine for you to love me. Now I know you just needed me to be real. A beat, a breath. So if you're watching this and your heart is heavy, please know this. Faith isn't for the perfect. It's for the desperate, the doubtful, the hurting, the ones who can't fake it anymore. I see you, I was you, and I'm still healing. The screen faded to black, not with music, but with a quote, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:32. And with that, her new beginning wasn't just hers, it was ours. Let this be your letter home.